So a question that I get asked so much is, how can I tell how far I hit my clubs? Well, in this video, that is what we are going to look at. We're going to be focusing mostly on the irons, but this really does include all the clubs, from wedge all the way through to driver. Firstly, we need a launch monitor. Now, it's going to be the only way that you can accurately process what is happening at strike. Without a launch monitor, you're pretty much just guessing. Now, I use a GC quad from Foresight, and I am lucky enough to be able to use it in a wonderful studio like this. And that's the next thing. If you're doing a gapping session, I actually recommend that you use an indoor setting. The reason for that is with launch monitor technology and the software is you can control what the conditions are. So what the Foresight and what the quad does is it calculates what is happening at impact by taking pictures. It then feeds that data into the algorithms, and then out the other side will plop out your yardages and everything else that is happening at impact. But I can control what is happening on the computer to mirror what is happening outside. But we will get on to gapping outside later in this video. Now, I am very well aware that the vast majority of people watching this video will not have this type of direct access to be able to wander into a fantastic studio, to turn on the launch monitor and to gap away to your heart's content. I understand that. However, many people watching this, unless you're in the farthest flung reaches of Nova Scotia, may have access to a professional with a launch monitor or be able to get to a facility which has this type of technology. It is becoming more and more readily available. Because I could tell you guys that if you manage to go out onto a field, hit your balls into the distance and pace your shots out, it'll be fine. But that won't be accurate, I'm really sorry to say. If you want the most accurate data and you actually want to know precisely what your yardages are, you're gonna have to find a launch monitor at the very least. If that is all you can do, however, then okay, fine. You know, I fully accept, as mentioned, that not everyone can access these facilities, but you have to be aware that there will be some compromise using that method. Something which I don't want you to compromise on is the golf ball. So, if you want accurate data and you want to be able to understand how far your clubs go, make sure that during your gapping session, you're using the golf ball, which you will continue to use on the golf course throughout a year. Obviously, if you start fitting like I have with the Pro V1 and then halfway through the year you switch to a completely different golf ball, that is going to affect your gapping and you have to go through all this process again. So with each launch monitor system, they have various quirks and things that you need to know about. As mentioned, the Foresight and the quad works by taking pictures at impact and then extrapolating the data. You have some other monitors, say the TrackMan, that works via radar. But this is worth looking at because you can change the conditions even though you are inside. For example, I've got the temperature here set to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I could adjust that, I could adjust wind, I could adjust wind direction, I could adjust altitude, I can adjust loads of these different factors which will have an effect on overall ball flight. So for example, if you want to get fit and you play your golf mostly in the high climbs of Colorado, you can adjust altitude to match where your golf course is. Now that's important and is an interesting thing that you can try and adjust the system to where you are playing. But I would actually do your gapping session based on an ideal condition. So like I said, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, no wind, just a beautiful day inside here in Manchester. But then what I can do is, let's say I am playing in the middle of the winter and it is freezing cold, the air is incredibly dense, there's a wind blowing into my face. I can take my gapping chart and then I could put in the various factors which would affect how far that ball is going to carry. And I would recommend that being the better way. So how can you take readings of a gapping session? Something which you need to bear in mind is the amount of time and energy you're willing to put into this endeavor. For example, if you're trying to fit all 13 clubs in one session and you want to hit 10 shots per club, that might not seem a lot, but all of a sudden, if you exclude the putter, you have 13 clubs to then gap. That's 100 130 shots. Now, if you rent out a space, generally that's going to be for an hour, all of a sudden that 130 balls within 60 minutes becomes a little bit more of an issue. If we're being honest about it, I'd recommend trying to get your gapping sessions done over the course of a month, 2 months. You know, the longer that you can have to actually dial in the data, the better it's going to be. Yes, you could hit one shot each, and as soon as you get a nice strike, you can say that's how far I hit. You will have data in your mind from, if you're a regular golfer, oh, I'm 150 yards out, this is what I normally hit. But remember, with this video, we are really talking about how to get accurate data, not just general data. One of the reasons I really like using the foresight system is that you can track your strike location by using these dots on the club face. Strike location, when you're doing your gapping, is absolutely critical. You need to be able to measure a distance gapping chart based on good strikes. Now, again, we could say, well, you know, you don't hit your irons well all the time. None of us do. However, you can't build a gapping chart based on what your bad strikes might be. You can only base it on good strikes, and then again, leave a little bit of room for error when on the golf course. So ultimately, we are looking for good strikes to help assess distance. Now, this is where it could be important to get a professional fitter or PGA Pro to take you through a gapping session, because there is other data that you need to be aware of. Some of this is fairly simple. So let's say you want to know how far you carry your driver. If you have 5 swings at 80 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden you have 2 swings at 90 miles an hour, and those 2 swings you strike very well, that's going to be skewing your data. Now, that is why I recommend trying to get your gapping sessions done over an extended period of time, because ultimately you want to be having a consistent data readout to understand how far your ball is going. So if you swing, and your 8-iron swing, for example, here is at 91 miles an hour today, next week I want to make sure that I'm swinging my 8-iron at 91 miles an hour. That's the only way to be able to get the data correctly. Other factors that you may need to be aware of, there are things like angle of attack. So how your club moves into the ball, how steeply the club is descending into impact. Dynamic loft, how much loft the club has at the point of impact. How far the ball is getting in the air, launch angle, descent angle. All these things really do make a difference if you're trying to gap your clubs correctly. And when you're going through your data, you want to be looking at a lot of these different points to make sure there's nothing too anomalous. Great word, anomalous. If you do a gapping session and you find that there are a few clubs where you see no difference in distance, that is where we could encounter our biggest problem. It's often the case when I've coached players with slower swing speeds, especially, that their short irons, their 8-iron, their 7-iron will often go as far as their 4-iron because they're not generating enough speed in the longer clubs. Now, there are 2 things that you could do here. If you notice that in your data, you can get new clubs, you are absolutely welcome, or you can get lessons, because that is something that we don't want to see. And it's only an accurate run of data where you'll be able to see what those issues might be. Now, finally, the gapping chart. And here is my start of year gapping, and this is just for my main irons. So I've not done my wedges fully, and I've not done my clubs after the 4-iron. And you can see here, it's mostly geared around carry distance. So carry distance for me is the most important thing, because you need to be assessing the conditions of the golf course. For example, I could carry my 7-iron a consistent distance, but if I play a course on a wet day and I play it on a dry day, the amount of roll that that ball will have is going to obviously be different. Now, that also could be affected by spin rates. If I'm hitting into a receptive green and I have a high amount of spin, I need to be aware of how much that ball will rip back. we've already spoken about swing speed. We want to be making sure that we have consistent swing speeds, and you will notice here as the clubs get longer and the lofts get lower, the swing speed will increase, and that is something we would expect. And here is the biggest issue that you may find. So this is my 8-iron, and it's carried 168 yards, which is just under what I would expect at 170. My strike wasn't great. The reason I know that it goes 170 yards is that I am 10 gapping sessions in, and it is February. So that is how much work I've been putting into gapping my irons. You can span that, wedges, drivers, all the rest of it. It is a long and extended process if you want to get the most accurate data. Let us transport ourselves away from this studio in Manchester all the way to the sunny climes of California. As you can see, we are out on a driving range, a grass driving range, and we're using a TrackMan, so a different system in a different setting. You see, one of the criticisms of using an indoor facility like this is you're hitting off a mat. Now, a mat can sometimes skew data. It can cause a fat shot, for example, to be not as extreme as it was out on the golf course. You can also not really get a bad lie in here. Everything is absolutely perfect. Now, if you're hitting off grass, and if you're on an outdoor situation where you're aiming at different targets, this could help give you a little bit more data to go away with and put into your chart. There's no perfect situation here, but if you can get an indoor data set, I would say that is going to get you in better stead than an outdoor data set to begin with. But it's also at the level that you're at. If you're a golfer, can I stop lying on the ground now?
You can stand up.
I'm going to stand up. You see, this does come down to the type of golfer that you are and the level that you're at. How I spoke about before, you can only judge a data gapping off your good strikes, and that is true, but you can build in a certain amount of variance. For example, if you hit your 8-iron 150 yards, but you know that your poor strike is a little bit off the toe, and the data shows that generally that is going to drop you 10 yards in carry, then you have this little bit of a gap where you can understand, okay, I've got 150 yards to clear the water. If I strike it poorly, then that ball might end up in the drink. So what can I do? I can club up, I can take this into account. I would also say that if you're going to give yourself 10 yards for a poor strike back, so from 150 to 140, also add on 5 yards for an absolutely perfect strike, because that, unfortunately, does happen. Sometimes you do strike it just really bloody well. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions on gapping, get down into those comments. Let's talk about this. We are a community here on SwingQuest. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon if you want to be notified of new videos. We have loads of coaching on this channel if you want to continue your SwingQuest. Maybe learn how to strike the ball a little bit better before doing a gapping session. Check these out here.